Hey, everybody, welcome to the Mosaic podcast. Today is going to be one of those days. Buckle your seatbelts starting early because when a visionary meets another visionary, God knows what's going to happen. I don't quite know how I bumped into this man, but am I ever happy that I have? Because even in just the few moments we've been talking in the green room before this, and I don't know him other than those few moments, the conversation started to really get interesting. And I said, whoa, 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 stop for a minute. I don't want to lose any of this. Let me give you an idea of who this guy is, okay? I'm not, you can find all this on his website, but I want to just get you an idea of who he is. David Gherson is the co-founder and CEO of the Empowerment Institute, and he's been called the #1 expert on social change. Imagine that, being called the #1 expert on social change. He applies his visionary leadership and social change expertise to designing second order change solutions for cities, countries, and the planet that enable the seemingly impossible to become possible. A mouthful there. What are second order change solutions? We're going to get into it. But can you imagine somebody who is dedicating their life to making the impossible possible? It sounds an awful lot for those of you who have followed along with me. It sounds an awful lot like the guy that I call myself. But over the past 4 decades, the initiative he's designed have won many awards and achieved much recognition. Let me just go a little further. In 1986, David organized at the height of the Cold War the passing of a torch of peace around the world, the first Earth Run. In partnership with the United Nations Children Fund, directly engaged 25 million people and 45 heads of state in 62 countries. Over 1 billion people watched the torch via the media circumnavigate the globe. For 86 days, wherever the torch of peace went, all wars stopped, and the world was united as one. Since then, this modern-day mythic story, embodying humanity's noblest aspiration for peace on earth and the oneness of humanity, has continued to be told over the world. You can hear a lot more about him by going to reinventing.earth, peace2030.earth, and empowermentinstitute.net. It is with a ton of joy and a ton of anticipation and a ton of excitement that I say, David Gershon, welcome to the Mosaic podcast. Thanks for being here. How are you?
Annie, thank you for the invitation, and maybe I need to interview you now that I hear more about you. So we'll start with you, since you asked first.
Okay. I have the honor of being with you. So what I want to just do is sort of set a context of how you came into this whole thing. But I want to go back before what you naturally think. What did your parents do?
Well, they both died many years ago. They had kind of middle class backgrounds and had a middle class business. Beautiful people, beautiful souls. They did a good job raising me. Mostly what they did is they gave me permission to be a free being and
Wow.
did not tell me how I was supposed to think or what I needed to do or how I was supposed to, live my life. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and that was some years ago because you and I'm guessing, you're probably a little younger than me. You're better looking and younger than me, but I'm assuming we're not too far away from the same age. And so in those days and age where people were coming off of um, I mean, many years before the Second World War and the Depression, so some of, like my parents grew up through that time. It was very important for them to have me be something, but I also grew up in a family where my father said, "I don't want to worry about this. I don't want to I want you to just be happy and do what's going to make you happy." My mom was more like, "But like they have it, so we need to have it," sort of type of person. But what an amazing environment you grew up in. What was the thing that you learned the most from growing up in that environment?
I had to figure out how to walk my path without any guidance. I had to figure out how not to be constrained by the social norms of the world that I was brought up in, that time. It's not just that time, it's humanity, the race, what you would often call the race consciousness. it wasn't just limited to that age. It's been going on for hundreds, thousands of years in some ways. So I was here to ask a whole set of different questions than what were traditionally asked about everything.
Yeah.
Like not one thing was like open, was not open for a question. So because they didn't tell me how to think, I had to figure it out. And in my early days, I was a little sad that I didn't get more guidance because I
Yeah.
literally had to figure everything out. Go to college if you want to. Um, I mean, it was like at that level. And I don't know if I want to or not want to. I mean, there was nothing like that was required of me to have to, so I had to make decisions.
What caused that disengagement? Because like when people hear it now, I'm just trying to hear it through the ears of my audience. It's almost unbelievable that a parent wouldn't want want to be more involved in sort of the well-being of their
That
child.
is a great question, actually.
Thank you.
When I tune in spiritually to them, what I get is that was actually their assignment.
I
So
see.
my evolution. Now, I doubt they would have a conscious awareness of
Right.
that.
Right.
But given how I've shown up in the world and what I'm here to do, it was a very important part of my developmental process.
Yeah.
Uh, and, they were not unattentive, but they really gave me a lot of breathing room. But there were some guardrails when they saw me doing totally weird stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't do that many I did weird things, I guess, by conventional standards, but I didn't go off the rails and get into trouble per se in the conventional sense. In the unconventional sense, I was always getting into trouble, but
Right.
not conventionally.
Right. Was this, were you growing up during the 60s and 70s? Is that when you were
Well, 50s
the
was when I
50s?
was in my, and 60s. Yeah.
Okay. So you weren't alone in your quest for understanding a new world in some ways. The 50s is a
I,
little
I
early.
was, I was part of the generation, the baby boom generation. The Aquarian age was being born. The hippie movement was getting born. Uh, I think I was just at the earliest stage of that.
Yeah.
Um, so people were asking different questions, but
Yeah.
I wasn't even asking those questions. I was asking, I guess, the spiritual questions. I mean, I think the beginning of my journey was a spiritual quest to know God and to know the deeper self and to understand the meaning of life. So those
So
were some of the bigger questions that I was.
so when you dive into that, there had to be a what was the essence of that? Like kids, very rarely do kids come in and just start at age 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, wondering what's going on spiritually in the world. Was there something that happened? Was it your parents sort of
I,
leading you on
I,
your
I
own?
think I came in with that as my mission. So I think I came in as a soul who was ready for those questions. I think it
Wow.
was transcendent of anything externally. But I mean, the time was primed. On September 9th, there's a movie that we signed up for, my wife and I, called The Beatles in India with Maharishi Mahesh.
Yes.
And I was very much tracking that energy that they were tracking, as were a lot of other people at that moment, like 67 or so. And that was the time when there was a lot of spiritual awakening, I would say, of a lot of people of my generation.
Were you doing drugs?
I was, but not that deeply. I mean, I certainly did my experimentation, but I got bored with that after a while. It wasn't like I was looking for an alternative to reality. I was really looking for what is reality.
Wow. Wow. And so what did you find?
Well, I found um, there was a key to reality that I had been looking for, the key to the universe. And it was that our thoughts create our experiences, our reality. So if we want to change our reality as an individual or collectively, we have to change the beliefs that shape that reality and manifest as that reality. That was the universal truth that I was seeking, and I became a student of that at the individual and at the collective level.
Was that given to you by a teacher? Was that given to you by a community of
I would say
people?
it was my own search I mean, I actually ended up with a guru, traditionally, the spiritual teacher thing. But I didn't get that learning from him. He was more traditional, like a more traditional Indian teacher type. And I got meditation practices, but I didn't get the quest because the Indian lineage is very much conventional.
Yeah.
Conventional, God type people teaching you how to meditate and get into that higher state of samadhi,
Yeah.
which I found really useful and exciting, but it wasn't really the whole story for me.
It's so interesting. Just if I can sidetrack for a minute, and I'll pull back quickly because I don't want to get lost in how I have no idea who you were, no idea what you do really before yesterday when I started to research you. Um, and I don't know if our stories could be more similar if you cast us together and threw and wrote them the same. Mine came because of the death of my parents early on, and that's in the book that I wrote that's right behind me. The Mosaic is sponsoring this show, and it's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day.
Wow.
And when he asks the adults who are the wise people that he knows where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So he sets out in search of the place called heaven.
Nice.
And the people he meets are not the holy men and the holy women and the shamans and the priests and the medicine women and the Aborigines elders. He meets the common ordinary people. He meets the blind woman and the juice man and the garbage man and the street artist and the homeless guy. And he wonders, why am I sitting with those people? And he says, I don't have anywhere to go though, so I might as well just sit and listen to them. And when he listens to them tell their stories, what he realizes is the person he's sitting with isn't at all the person he first came up to. Because what he saw when he first came up to him was what he saw. In listening to him, he started to see who they were.
Nice.
And he wonders what would happen if I could see a world that is not the world that I see, but the world that actually is.
Hmm.
So a series of questions, probably different than your questions, but those were the questions that I asked as I traveled around the world. Do you mind me asking who your teacher was, who your guru was?
Uh, well, I've had several different types of teachers, but the initial one was an Indian guru called Sri Chinmoy.
Sri Chinmoy, sure. Beautiful man. Yeah, I met Sri Chinmoy over my teacher is Yogananda. So
Oh, nice.
so I've met Sri Chinmoy and been amongst them. Beautiful vibration. Um, what scared you most growing up?
I don't know that that would be something that I can't remember anything that's scaring me, really. Scaring me. Nothing resonates.
Nothing resonates. Well, were you did you fit into the world that you were a part of, or did you feel like you were on the outside of it?
Definitely the outside. Yeah, I was never drawn to anything that was conventional. I mean, but I didn't, because I had no path laid out for me,
Yeah.
no social norms of how I was supposed to live or be. I was always just figuring stuff out along the way. And I concluded early on that I wasn't interested in being part of an in crowd. I wasn't interested in an alternative crowd. In fact, the truth is my childhood was relatively unconscious spiritually.
Unconscious.
Say I was awake. I would say I was in a holding pattern, waiting for my freedom from the constraints of a family that was just living a conventional, reasonably conventional life. When I went to college, I started to ask the deeper questions and started my awakening process, probably when I was about 20.
Yeah. So, and I'm sorry for hanging and staying in this little spot for a minute, but
Well, it's a spot I rarely anyone ever spends time with. I mean,
I,
considering what I do in the world, people don't usually hang out in this spot. So I'm happy to be here with you.
I like that nobody hangs out with you in this spot because sort of in the psychological world that I've passed through amidst the many worlds that I've passed through, so much of what the theories are is that how we grow up until the age of 6 really dictates a lot of who we are in the life that we live. And it feels to me like you weren't a guy that played football with the kids in the schoolyard. Maybe you were. I don't want to assume anything. It didn't seem like you joined a fraternity.
That was not the path per se.
That was not what?
That was not the path per se that I
Yeah.
was on. Yeah.
So did you feel a little lonely growing up?
I mean, I think I have had a sense of not fitting into any social norms for
Bad.
my whole life,
Bad.
not just that. It was kind of like I was getting trained
Yeah.
unconsciously
Yeah.
in how one asks different questions and creates a different reality system.
Yeah. I guess that sentence right there was what I was looking for, not because I was hoping to find it, just because when you think about someone who wants to reinvent the planet, a person that's pretty content with the planet the way it is doesn't try to reinvent the planet. And so, like, what I was fishing for is what was that space within you as a kid growing up where you just
You
felt
know
the
what? You know what
planet.
I think it is, Danny. This
Please.
is sort of a cosmic answer because I think I came in with a very clear purpose, and that purpose happened when I was about 20 years old. It started to really show up, and it was to, well, I would never phrase it this way now, but it was
Yeah.
to change the world.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just to change the broken world that was in existence. So I was not engaged in social protest in college. One would think someone like me would be,
Right.
because I was never interested in going against the status quo or this current, what wasn't working. I was always asking a different question, and it became the organizing principle of my life, which is what's possible and how do
Wow.
we create it for
Wow.
my life and for the world. And so that question was been kind of the question that unconsciously was guiding me in my earlier days, and then became an explicit question. And when you ask that question, you get very different answers
Yeah.
than what's wrong and how do I fix it, or how
I
do I
love
just
that.
fit in.
I love that. I want the listener to rewind right now and just hear what David just said. Because when you ask the question of what's possible, you get a completely different answer than when you ask the world what's broken and how can I fix it. And I think that question right there, if you get nothing else from this podcast, I would feel happy that you asked that question and just leave this podcast with that question.
I had an interesting experience. I was asked to speak at this prestigious university um, to a group of people who were successful in mid-career, but looking for the second stage of their life, having succeeded by the conventional standards. So they were presidents of companies, they were
Right.
presidents of universities, they were, heads of major NGOs. They met all the criterion for meeting success, and they were successful. And this was called Advanced Leadership Institute. And they asked me to come and speak, and the people before me were all explaining how they were all like them, actually, conventional people with incremental ideas for how to maybe make life different or look a little different. And I said, I want to tell you something before I start. I don't have those kinds of credentials. I mean, I had some kinds of credentials, but I wasn't seeking those kinds of credentials in my life,
Yes.
institutional credibility. I was seeking to see what's possible and how to create it. And I said, if you want to actually have impact in the world, you've got to ask that question. Because otherwise, you're going to show up just like you did over the last, 40 or 50 years with the same responses. And if you're looking to get out of the box and have impact in the world, then you got to get different questions. And then I
Yeah.
explained them, my journey. It was quite, I think, revelatory for people at that mid-stage in their lives who were wishing for another operating system for
Yeah.
living,
Yeah.
having impact, and feeling like they're relevant.
We say the same thing in different language, but we say the same thing. Because
Nice.
I would do some of the same work. I would walk in and do innovation work with corporations, and I would walk into three piece suit boardrooms, and in a t-shirt and jeans. And I remember one time walking in. It was one of the first ones I did. I had a t-shirt and jeans on. I walked in, and they said, "Excuse me, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You were about to start a meeting." I said, "Oh, really? What's your meeting on?" And they said, "No, you don't understand. We're starting a meeting. If you are you coming to pick up the garbage or something? Like, what are you doing here?" I said, "Yeah, I think you could say I'm coming to pick up the garbage. That's a pretty fair assessment." And they said, "Well, can you pick it up? Can you pick it up real quickly?" And I said, "I think I'm already starting." I said, "I'm here to lead your conference on innovation." And did you expect to someone in your silo to come in and look just like you and be just like you to teach you how to think outside of the box of who you are? And they said, "Whoa, like, okay, we're already schooled."
Nice.
But I talk about the fact that we live in silos of common belief systems. And the world wasn't built with silos. The world was built with open fields. And we were
Right.
supposed to commingle with like and unlike minds. And then when we commingle with like and unlike minds, we actually rub up against each other. And what seemed impossible to us because we only saw it a certain way, now with fresh insights and unlike thoughts, suddenly has the possibility of becoming possible because we see it a different way. And those perceptual shifts are what happens in changing the world we see and making the world a different place. Not a better place or worse place, but a different place, maybe a better place.
Hopefully better.
Yeah, hopefully better. Um, you said something as we were about to come in on, and I stopped you because I wanted you to say it here, which was this idea of changing the world, but what are we changing the world for? Can you recapture that thought and bring it out here?
Well, let's start with a little bit about this notion called reinventing the planet, because it's different than changing the world.
Great.
To my earlier point, changing the world is often a fixing the world. Uh,
Yes.
you could
Yes.
change the word changing to fixing. Um, and so maybe I need to start before I get into what it is that the process that I'm creating in the world.
Love it. Please do.
So when I woke up,
Hold on 1 minute. Will you do me a favor?
please,
Will you try and say it on this podcast in a different way than you've ever said it before?
sure.
Like, I don't want you to say what you've said 1,000 times before right here. Even if you say it what you say, I want you to say it somehow differently. So I can.
Nice. I like the challenge of that. You
Thank
bet.
you.
Um, well, let's play off of the notion of innovation, since that's the space that you've occupied and are familiar in that space with the processes of innovation. So, the world that I live in, that I've lived in, you know the term disruptive innovation.
Yes. Yes.
So, what I have found myself doing as a social innovator, which is one way to characterize who I am, social visionary, social innovator, is that I've begun to create, by asking different questions, I was disrupting the current social change paradigm regularly. Because every question I would ask was a very different question in the current social change. When you ask what's possible as opposed to what's wrong,
Yeah.
it's like it's like you get the key to another universe.
Yeah.
And over time, I started, and then I built a body of work called empowerment. We were kind of the early pioneers, my wife and I, of this whole world of how you empower someone to envision and create what they want in their lives or in their organizations or their communities or the planet. And as a result, I was always working with this notion that's called the growing edge. So let me explain the growing edge.
Okay.
So in the natural world, if something is alive, it's always growing. There's always the next edge. And when something is dead, then there are no more growing edges. So a tree that doesn't have growing edges is a dead tree. And so many people see change from the point of view of there's a place to get to and we're either there or we're not. And when we are there, then we get bored. Until we're there, we often judge ourselves and say, we're not where I should be. A lot of shoulding, if you will. So I found myself asking, since I've led this work for 40 years, 40 years, what's the growing edges for humanity? Not just what's my growing edges or what's this organization's or this community's, but what is humanity's growing edges? And this term called evolutionary drivers appeared in my world, which were not just growing edges, but what are the places that humanity needs to evolve? What is the driving force of evolution itself on the planet? And I identified 5 of them over the course of time. I did not consciously think that I was doing that. And I would always have these dreams at night where I would never have enough credits to graduate from college. And it was because I wasn't ready to graduate. I still had more learning. I mean, I feel like the stage in my life, I feel like I've entered kindergarten. I mean, it's not like I feel like I'm now at this evolved state. I feel like I've now got the potential to enter kindergarten. So I feel like I've needed.
And you're talking about you feel like you've entered kindergarten now.
Now.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
What I mean by that is that I feel like I am so free of all that I know, that I'm ready to learn all that I don't know.
Yeah.
And in order to do what I'm doing, one needs to approach it with that. I'm discovering that mentality. Otherwise, there's all these constraints.
So can I jump in for a minute here? Because I know you want to go into your 5 steps, and I want to, your 5 foundations.
Well, eventually I'll need to get there to help people understand where I want to take us.
And I'm more than willing to let you get there.
Well, I don't need to go there, but I'm just saying probably that would be.
I just want it to become less of a class and more of a.
No, I'm in service to this process that you're taking us through. So
one of the things I find when I'm doing another conversation that I have that I'm holding a series of, and invite people that I don't know into a Zoom room, and it's called 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers. We're already over 100 conversations, but
nice.
I'm maintaining and it's 2 people who don't know each other walk into a room and just sit down and see what happens. Some of the conversations are fabulous, some are boring, some are, none of them have a judgment on them. But one of the things that I noticed, and it's a long way to ask a short question, but stay with me a minute. One of the things that I noticed is that when I hold the space for people in that room to be loved and accepted, to be listened to and heard, to be acknowledged and validated, it doesn't happen right away, but somewhere in the course of the about 45 minutes to an hour that we're speaking, who they are not falls off. And suddenly they see themselves as who they are because they're no longer needing to protect themselves or defend themselves or hold up this armor. And it just somehow, without them even realizing it, slips off and falls away. When you speak of what you're doing, I almost feel that that's the process you're doing on a global scale. But I wanted to ask you about it because I don't want to assume that's what you're doing. Does anything what I'm saying make sense to you? I know it makes sense in the human level.
Well, I trust that there's an intelligent universe. And so when someone shows up in my world and asks me a question, I see the universe asking me this question, and so I pay attention.
Okay.
So I'm just listening. And so the question, everything you say, I feel it's important for me to hear. So I don't have a point of view that says we should go here or there. I certainly don't need to repeat the 5 whatevers. And we don't even have to talk about anything related to that. It's what I'm spending 24/7 on. But we can talk about, maybe the conversation is how not to talk about it. and talk about everything around it and let everyone else just go to my website and learn about it.
Yeah, if people go to your website, they will discover those things because I was on your
So
website
David,
and
that's
I
fantastic.
saw that. So that's remember what I said to you is like I'm less important what people will find out when they go to your website
So
talking here.
let's not talk. So there's these 5 things that if you go to my website, you're going to find out. I'm not telling you unless I'm forced to tell you.
and and, and we can talk about it, but you are such an listen to okay. Let me just try and share with you what I feel. Okay,
Yeah,
one of the beautiful things about the Mosaic podcast is I take an opportunity to invite people to be a fly on the wall into conversations that they might never ever have with interesting people from all segments of society. They can be homeless people, they can be presidents of corporations, they can be leaders in AI, they can be scientific people, they can be common ordinary people. And what I want them to do is get a feel for the person
I
who's
like it.
doing this stuff, right? Because there's something like your work is spectacular, and but you've been on other podcasts and you've given other talks, that have talked about your work. They can hear your work in other places. What they can't hear is who you are in other places.
I think this is great. This is a growing edge for me. I love that there's an opportunity to go to that place.
Yes.
And so let's do it.
So,
I trust that you have exactly the right skills to ask those kinds of questions.
well, let's see. Who knows if we do or not, but we won't lose anything if we don't try, right?
You betcha.
The question I have for you is now that you're doing this work that you're doing, what I've watched happen in the course of people's lives is they discover something incredible and it's a growing edge for them. And then it solidifies a little bit because that's where they stay. They stay in the growth of the growing edge, but the growing edge doesn't really grow beyond those edges.
Nice.
And
Yes.
so, what I really am interested in is what is your growing edge now that you've discovered this growing edge, if that makes sense to you?
I'll tell you a story. When I was building our Empowerment Institute with my wife, which is a powerful model for empowering people, and I was proud of it, I went into meet this, I thought it was an editor of a magazine. I didn't really think more than that. I think he was the editor of Esquire magazine. But he was also a spiritual seeker and a wise soul, young as he was, and as we both were at the time. And he said, after I went through my whole thing, I was thinking he was going to say, "Oh, this is really cool when you're done." And he said, "I feel sorry for you." Oh, okay, you got my attention. I said, "Tell me why." I said, "Because I rarely meet anybody who creates anything, any body of work that doesn't get stuck in it and can't get out from underneath it because their identity becomes so connected with it, and then they become that." And I thought, wow, that was a gift early on how to keep transcending. And all my big projects have always had these audacious aspirations, and every one of them I've got trapped in.
Yeah.
I mean, like Reinventing the Planet could be another one of those. In fact, it was becoming that.
Yeah.
As audacious and as aspirational as it is. So my growing edge, to your point, is to constantly be transcending whatever I think is the next thing that I'm supposed to do and not get stuck in it. I'll give you another example.
Hold on, before you do, let me just invite the listener into this conversation because I want you to see and I want you to feel more than see. Did you feel a little shift that just happened in the way our conversation was going? Did you feel the shift from that place which is so easy to get into, which is the edge of the growing edge, from inside the edge, to the edge of the growing edge from outside of the edge that David just took us through right there? And did you feel the courage of his life that he's lived that allows him to move outside of that inside edge to the outside edge to say, how do I continue to do this? And I want to ask you, where are you stuck in your own life? on the inside edge of something that is your innovation, but is no longer able to innovate because you're on the inside edge of it rather than the outside edge of it.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Please go
Well,
forward.
this definitely wins the prize. Not that I was thinking there was a prize to be won of the most interesting interview.
Okay, I like winning. I like winning prizes. That's good.
So it's clearly the most innovative interview. I like it. Thank you for the way that you're taking us on this ride.
Everybody that comes on my show says that because I'm not interested. Everybody asks the same basic questions, and it's all by who people are. I'm in all of you. I don't have to pronounce my all of you. I'm in all of you by the fact that you're here with me. And so I would love to hear how you are pushing the outside edge now from outside the edge, not inside the edge.
Well, it's an interesting. I was about to tell you a story
Please.
where I started learning about this growing edge. My wife and I went to this beautiful resort in St. Lucia, and we were looking to find this beautiful room that we wanted to stay in. And we got the room, and we were so excited to be in the room. And then they decided to give us an upgrade, another room. But I didn't want to move because I love this room. And it seemed like it was just exactly the room that I was picturing for my whole 12 months until I got there. And my wife said, David, this is a much, higher value room. Why are you so attached to this room? Just because I've been so excited to be in it. Anyway, so we went with the program and yes, we accepted the upgrade, and it was a whole new universe that opened up. It was another space that I would never have gone to, and I wasn't even aspiring to. And I realized that was a growing edge.
Yeah.
That I get very comfortable with the spaces that I was occupying, literally in this case, or spiritually or psychologically in other cases, or socially, social change-wise. So that was like a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Because it was so much better. And once I started understanding that, then I became aware of that growing edge. And so kind of it opened the door of what I would call the opening to abundance. That not to create any limits. It fit me perfectly, but I was realizing I was getting stuck in the happiness of what looks to be so wonderful.
So David, the golden question, because I'm 1,000% sure that there are people listening right now that know exactly what you're talking about when you tell that story. That everything that they've looked forward to, everything that they've wanted is suddenly right in their hands. And they're offered an opportunity to have more than it is that they want. And they want to stay with what they want because they know that's what they've wanted. And why should they want more than what they wanted? That's what they finally got what they wanted. But an opportunity has been given for them to go to a growing edge outside of what they want. And I'm sure that just about everybody listening here has done that. What do you do at that moment? And you've been very honest because you were very honest to say, I didn't really want to go there, but I went with the program and I did it. If you can dive into that moment of how do you go back into that program when you are completely content to receive the smaller blessing of what you've always wanted rather than the larger blessing of what you've been given?
I am a student of these spiritual teachings called the Ascended Masters.
Okay.
And they are beings who have, like a Yogananda type, who have achieved a certain level of spiritual wisdom, enlightenment, if you will, and then they transcend, and then they are now on the other side helping humanity learn and grow. I feel very connected with those energies, because where I show up in my world, I need help from outside of the box, right? 3D box is fairly constrained box. So they have a principle, and you call it an evolutionary principle, which I have subscribed to, which is the notion of self-transcendence. And so I feel it's not just self-transcendence, but it's the notion of transcendence at everything, so it's feels like it's a trap when we get comfortable in the known commodity of whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I will get to your question of what is beyond reinventing the planet, because that really kind of tees into that. Because I mean, what I see as the end state is this notion of called the golden age.
Hmm.
And I feel like one of my missions is to create that golden age of humanity, which the Reinventing the Planet work is a process to enable. And when I tune into what that looks like and feels like, and I feel like that's the kindergarten I'm in right now, is, like how does that work? And what I keep getting is it's going to be co-created by everyone. And my job is to help facilitate that. And there's no right answer or wrong answer, except it's a higher frequency answer, where it's based on these frequencies that are love and oneness and the things that everyone might wish to see, but don't really know how to have. So what that does, though, is it makes everyone part of the solution. It's not like I have to now just lower my carbon footprint. Some of the things like I've done in the past is helping, deal with climate change. And all these things I still do. And this one is way more creative, way more open-ended. Like how does one create a new community based on a set of frequencies, for example?
Yeah.
So the notion requires self-transcendence. So that's what I have come to learn. I feel like I got my first wake-up call in that hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I processed it with my wife, and I said, "Yeah, I need to learn this." And I'm still there, and I keep asking that question. So it's very appropriate for you to be taking this here.
I love it. One of the things that, I was at Hay House for a lot of years. I was there for 10 years.
Right.
Okay.
I remember that connection, yes.
And so when I came, they were doing about $3 million a year. When I left, they were doing $100 million a year. And don't, by any stretch of the imagination, give me more importance than I am worth. It was a team of very ordinary people that did extraordinary things by having extraordinaries come together to create extraordinary things. And we were just in a moment of time where things really worked. But one of the things that I saw in writing this book, The Mosaic, is that a mosaic doesn't live in a vertical reality. It lives in a horizontal reality. Like if you think of the image of a mosaic, there's not pieces above and below. It's normally not a 3D mosaic where there are pieces built on top of other pieces. Sometimes it could be, and it could be interesting. But most of them are pretty much on a horizontal atmosphere. And the whole paradigm of horizontal reality started to come into place for me. And what would happen if the verticality of our world, where we fix people, change people, guide people, help people, bring people to an understanding, were simply to dissolve into the beauty of what just happens when pieces come together to create beauty just by the very nature of them, their being together. And I was talking to you about some of the visions that I have, that on my website, themosaiconline.com, there's a tab called The Swarm, and I would love to talk to you about that under a separate cover, about how the mass of people can come together to create the world that they want to live in through a technology that uses AI and human intelligence coming together. In the world that you're reinventing, beyond the world that you're reinventing, what's that reality look like?
What does it look like beyond reinventing the world?
Yeah, what does it look like? What does the reinvented world look like, and what does the world beyond the reinvented world look like? If you can humor me both places.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm a student of good questions, so I'm always loving questions that take me to places I haven't been before.
I love that.
I have just completed this Jedi training as of last night.
Wow.
Um,
Congratulations.
we had an amazing gathering of people from around the world, and the training was on the Peace on Earth by 2030 game that we wanted. Well, I snuck in one of the 5 leaders. So learn more. You already got the website, and you got the whole message in the name of the game. But the subtitle of that is of this Jedi training is called Planetary Frequency Raising Leadership. And so I've become a student, a teacher of frequency raising and scale of the planet, and bringing people into the leadership capacity to do that. And so the world beyond where we are is what some people call the 5th dimension, or beyond a 3D dimension, where it's a higher frequency, where the world is based on love and oneness and unity, the exact opposite of fear and division and all the qualities of our world at the moment. So the world beyond, the world that I see us creating in the golden age is based on seven frequencies. I'm not going to give you the frequencies because there's no, you can download any content. Just have to download the story and you'll find this on, go to Peace 2030, go to Jedi training and you'll learn more about that. And my 7 classes, which are all free. So in that world, you are creating every social system, every organization, every life based on these frequencies. They're not even principles. They're not even behaviors. They're at a higher level. They're frequencies. So when someone was asked me in the class last night, and we now call them the golden age frequency.
Okay.
I want to build a conscious business, and I've been very excited to take some of the things I've been learning in this Jedi training to apply. I said, well, let me take you beyond a conscious business. What would a golden age business look like, which is based on these 7 frequencies? And then you get to create it. You don't even have to find the formula or the template. You just, now it has to be based on love. Let me share this because I think
Sure, go ahead. Yeah. I've got you scared to share. Don't be scared. Tell me what you're doing.
No, I'm trying. I like the game you're playing, so I just want to make sure I'm playing within the rules that you created.
There are no rules, my friend. You're free.
There are rules already, because he wants to have rules. So the 7 frequencies are oneness, faith, empowerment, unity, cooperation, abundance, and love.
Beautiful.
And they grow out of the Peace on Earth game that you read, the first Earth and you read about, those 7 strategies were emerged that enabled that experience to be successful. And I called those out and created behaviors, which is where I normally go. And then I stepped out of the behaviors and the strategies into the frequencies and downloaded these 7 frequencies as I distilled. So it's a deep distillation. And then I became aware as I had done it, and this is all organic. And I think in the last few weeks, in fact, I've kind of come to this insight.
Beautiful.
That those become, you've probably read, and I've read, lots of people have read, X number of books on how to create this organization or that organization or this, whatever, 7 principles of this. This is a different level. You have to work at it. So now what would an organization or a community or a world look like, or an education system or an economic system or a healthcare system based on those frequencies? And those were 5th dimensional frequencies.
Yeah.
So this is when then humanity evolves out of this current contracted state into that, these become the guideposts. And then you have to co-create with them. And each one, so one person in my class decided she was so excited she's going to create a golden age calendar. a whole new calendar, which we launched on Lionsgate portal on August 8th. And we were going to rename every day. So faith, so we had Oneness Sunday, Faith Monday, Empowerment Tuesday. And then people are now living their day based on those frequencies.
Right. Love it.
So that's the kind of creativity that's
Love it.
available.
Are you aware of this little device? Can you see what it even is?
I see it. I don't know necessarily what it is.
It's called the Healy. And are you aware of the Healy?
No, I am not.
Inside this little device is programmed, that you program through your iPhone, 140,000 different frequencies of vibration.
Really?
And what it does is it works on healing every dimension of your being. So for instance, I had in my body, 80% of my body was in pain at a level 8 or above. And I was immobilized. Basically, I couldn't move. I basically could sit and think, and I could talk, and I could do whatever I did. I got this because I thought, why not try it? Within 1 or 2 sessions, my pain went from a level 8 to a level 2. And it went from 80% of my body to 10% of my body. And it's the power of frequency. It's exactly what you're talking about. But people are manifesting things now. Yogananda used to speak about yugas, time frames.
Right.
Right? And we have been in the time frame of the lowest vibrational time frame, which is mass, body.
Kali Yuga.
Kali Yuga. But we are, his teacher told us we're about 300 years into the next yuga, which lasts like 24,000 years, which is an energy thing. And so
The Golden Age Yuga.
yeah, and so it literally will change. The world will change whether we participate in it or not, because we're going to change from a world of form to a world of energy. And you already see that happening. You already see it.
That's my job. So I am creating the ley lines. That's what I feel is the way I would characterize the mission
Love it.
that I'm carrying, which transcends reinventing the planet. And the ley lines are frequency based, and
Love it.
teaching, people how to become students of their frequencies and raising frequencies and working with these higher frequencies, which people in the class were saying, I've never understood that term. I certainly never saw a structure, a pathway, or a process. And I've never seen, any kind of a platform. I mean, I'm fascinated by this thing. I will definitely.
I'll get you more information.
Please.
Because I think you'll love it.
Well, I already love it. Such
Yeah.
a thing exists. I'm like thrilled to know such a thing exists.
I mean, I've been having this in my pocket, and I've been working on the frequency of healing while we've been talking.
So it's keyed into different frequencies. I just adore that.
Yeah, I think you'll I think you'll love it. I think you'll absolutely love it. My wife's researched it, and I'll send you an email with her email on it, so you and she can get involved in conversation.
Yeah, one can buy this, I assume.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not a multi-level marketing, but they give a little percentage to people who find people. So, but
That your wife benefit from me purchasing it, which I will.
But even without it, what happened for me personally, the woman who presented it to me. You know how you meet somebody and you just don't like them the minute you meet them? I mean, it very rarely happens to me because I like most people. But there was something about her that she annoyed me. Her energy was all over the place. It was terrible. And so she was the one that was presenting it because I said I was in pain and I was feeling down. And she said, well, let me do a session on you. I said, I don't want you anywhere near me. I'm very conscious of who I put allow to come into the vibration of who I am. And she said, well, it's not really me. It's going to be this thing. And I said, I don't know. I don't like it. She said, just try it. Let's just, forget about it. So every single indication that I would have that would psychologically impact me to be, want to have it was against me having it, and it still worked. She did 2 programs. One was a sleep program and one was a pain program. and I was so energized in my being that I had problems sleeping. I was only sleeping anyway 3 hours a day, but I just couldn't sleep that much. That night, and for about a month later, and now we're running the program again for sleep. I'm sleeping like a baby, deep, hard
Well,
sleep.
so this is a golden age technology, in my judgment.
Yes,
That's how I would characterize it. Because
yes,
working at that level, now of course one can do this on their own, you know,
yes,
and there of course you can do it through color and you can do it through music. You can, if this is,
yeah.
yet another device. So I'm always intrigued by that.
Yeah, yeah. In no way did I want to say it's an only way technology, but it's what I wanted to just say is the world is developing now and discovering these new ways because we're entering into that time of our life. Um, Let me wrap it up a little bit because, and I want you to come down a little bit to common man because you're not uncommon man, but so much of what you say is in a world that some people might have difficulty understanding because it just feels too different than their reality. And that's not meant in any way to
No,
say,
I accept that. When you have to define terms, if you're bringing new terms into someone's world,
yeah,
which I'm happy to explain,
yeah.
but that's what you want to make us say.
And I didn't let you explain too many of them, so that's my bad, not yours, okay? Um, when my normal question that I can't ask you because I normally say to you when you look at the normal closing question is when you look at the world we see, is this the world you always dreamed of handing over to your children? But you're reinventing the world. So obviously the answer to that question would not be a yes. This is the world that I want to hand over to my kids. So what is it that people could do in terms of reinventing the world? I know I'm going to get them to your website. I want them to see your website. In the Reinventing the World website, there is also a video, a short video that's on there that is going to tell you about the five foundations that I want you to see. It's a 6 minute video maximum. I don't even think it goes that long. You'll see those. It's done really well. It's easy to watch. It's easy to understand. So, but what's one thing somebody could do who
Well,
wants to get a
yeah,
different frequency?
who wants to do the right thing and do good in the world, maybe, well, on September 20th, we are launching our Global Peace on Earth by 2030 movement.
Fabulous.
They go to peace2030.earth, they can start a team of people, friends or neighbors or people in their community, anybody they want to hang out with. We have 1,200 team leaders from around the world, from Afghanistan to you name it, about America, who are committing to creating peace on Earth by 2030 and starting by taking these 7 actions, each of which is correlated to a frequency. We don't talk about the frequencies. You just experience them as you take these actions. So it's a little like your little device. Um, it's active, it's demanding in the sense that you have to engage and be part of a solution as
Yeah.
opposed to being passive and saying the world is bad and I feel, disempowered and a victim of how bad things are, which is like a very low frequency thought, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but this shows you how, and it builds the case that if 40 million people show up and they change their belief to that we can from we can't, we actually could shift the whole thing.
Love that.
So I think my gift is that there's hope,
Yeah.
and this is a pathway.
I love it. I love it. In a world where so many people have lost hope, the gift of saying there is hope and bringing hope is a huge gift to give to the planet and to the people in the planet.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are listening who have lost hope, for those of you who are listening who have gotten caught up in the daily news cycle of the media's constant struggle of back and forth, this one against that one, for those of you who are dealing with COVID and disease that is spreading, for those of you who are dealing with a Black Lives Matter or a Me Too movement and feeling unlistened to and unheard. Let's ask ourselves the question, what's possible? Let's ask ourselves the question of if a smiling, beautiful man, like the one that I'm looking at in this beautiful room that he's in, looks at you with that gentle smile and says, my gift is to tell you there's hope. Why not receive that gift?
I would agree. Please do receive it.
Right?
I mean, you and humanity, because if you believe in the future and you have hope for it, you will literally help create it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So please be part of the solution.
And remember how we started out. I love when a conversation comes full circle, because we started out by talking about the fact that our thoughts can create a different reality than the one that we're living in right now. So if you believe there's not hope, guess what? You're right. And if you believe there is hope, guess what? You're right.
And
Because
that
you,
the world that you actually experience, aside from whatever else is happening in the larger world, you have that experience of whatever you believe.
yeah, I love that. David, I want to thank you so much for sharing yourself with us and the audience here, and for taking your time to put up with my, annoying sort of questions.
No, unconventional interview style, I love it. I will remember this interview. It has touched me and has helped me actually think about things in new ways. So you've done good. Thank you.
Absolutely. And for those of you who listen regularly, this was an interview not like a lot of interviews, and I want you to just sit with it a little bit. I want you to go back and rewind and play it again. I want you to, if you have any tendency to write it off because it's not what you believe or not what you think or you don't understand it, I want you to pause and I want you to go back and say, how can I see it? How can I understand it? You don't have to agree with it, but how can I at least ingest the knowledge that David's given? You can decide what you want to do with it. You're free. You can do whatever you want. But imagine if the result of the ingestion is hope rather than fear. Imagine if those 7 principles would actually raise the vibration of your life, that you could actually, the frequency of your life would change the life frequency that you live in.
Those are great questions for people. So I hope that you take them to heart, because I think that they frame the opportunity. And that is certainly my prayer, is that
Yes.
they will receive these kinds of possibilities in their lives. And there's no reason why not to, other than, our fears of the new. So, I always, because I before I did this class, I did a prior class that was based on COVID, actually. And I got into the whole frequency. It was called Personal and Planetary Frequency Raising. And then that opened up this whole Jedi training. But it came out of all the research around wellness and health from the quality of your immune system, which is a function of your frequency.
Yes.
So your thoughts create your frequency. And if you have these fearful, negative thoughts, then you lower and become more susceptible to COVID. So this is eminently pragmatic on the one hand. But beyond that, I call it the COVID chrysalis, is a time for you and all of us and the world to ask deep questions about the future of our lives and our worldview. So I'm part of that, right? This is happening as part of that. So I'm like, you've attracted me and us into your life to ask these questions and be willing to go to places that have made you maybe uncomfortable because you're not familiar with them.
Absolutely. And so to find out more about David and the work that he's doing, and to hear about the things that I told him I didn't want him to say here because they could find them on the website.
It would be much less interesting. Let me put it this way. So this is a lot more. You can read about them. And this is a cool video. You'll love seeing it. But it's all part of like the hope.
Yes. Yeah. So go to reinventing.earth, go to peace2030.earth, and go to empowermentinstitute.net. There are all his social media links are there, all the information you need to know. I'm sure there's a way to contact him there. Contact him, contact his organization. There is an opportunity coming up very soon to be a part of Peace 2030 .earth. Go there and join into it and see what it feels like to do it. Why not? Why not, right? What do you have to lose? It's an honor for me to have you, for those of you who come and listen all the time, to have you here again with us. Thank you so much. If you like this or like any of the things that we're doing, the way anything spreads is when people like something that they see, they tell people that they like about something that they like that they saw. So if people you like don't know about it, share it with them. If you don't want to share it, that's fine. It'll spread on its own without us if it's supposed to. But if why not be a part of bringing into the world in this moment hope and inspiration rather than fear and just pain of suffering. Share us with your friends. If you like it on Apple Podcasts, star it, write some comments on it. And again, we are one piece away in a mosaic. We're one piece away from an entirely new reality. David might be that piece for you right now. It's an introduction to a piece that you've never seen before. Connect to the piece and see what happens. You can always go back to where you were. Why not take the journey and see what happens? Again, David, thank you. Is there anything you want to say going out before we go?
Well, I mean, I just want people to feel into what hope feels like and what hope feels like in your body, in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. It is a door into a very different experience. And when you open that door, you don't open it for yourself. You open it for everyone in your life, because if you are a person of hope, you can build it on something solid enough than just wishful thinking. Wishful thinking is better than nothing. I will take wishful thinking, but whatever it's built upon, everyone in your life will be affected by it, because they're looking for people who are, beacons of light and hope for the world. And so it's not just for yourself, it's for your children, it's for your family, your friends. So go for it.
Open the door. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for being with us. For those of you who have listened, thank you again so much. We'll be back soon with our next guest on Mosaic Podcast. But I can't thank you enough for giving us the most valuable asset that you have, which is your time. Thank you for spending that with us. And until next time, God bless.